Hello, welcome back. It is week 196 on Out on That Line podcast. I'm Jeff with my co-host Alex. As always, Alex, how we doing this week?
Oh, Jeff, why don't you come on over here and I'll show you who your daddy is? Because I ain't that shy and I ain't that hard to find. But I'm riled up. Honk, honk, skeet, skeet, motherfucker. We got a great Geese episode for you this week, and I can't wait. And Jeff, how are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. If we do have a great Geese episode coming right at the folks out there, but I'm going to tell you first a little bit about a band called Turnstile and the concert I went to here in Austin, Texas last night. This is, well, when people hear it'll be like 4 or 5 nights ago, but at the Moody Amphitheater here in Austin, Texas. I'd never been to the venue before. It was only standing, which was fine, but you know we're getting close to 40 here, and the dogs were barking by the end of the night. I'll tell you what. But what an absolute banger of a concert. For folks that are familiar with Turnstile, they opened with "Don't Play," which is an absolute fire starter of a song. They reminded everybody that they are a hardcore band. They played a few songs from their old catalog. They played "Real Thing" from the Time and Space album, which is one of my favorite songs by them. And they just go so hard. They played TLC second, just like kept it rolling. Every song just hit, like you just felt it in your bones. You just felt it in your spirit when you were there, and everybody there for the same reason. It was just like a really, really good concert. Ending with Birds, that crowd was insane. The way that breakdown hits is almost unlike any other feeling I've had at a concert. Maybe comparable to like when Coheed plays in Keeping Secrets, and they go through the kind of the softer part in the middle of the song. I forget what the technical term for that is. But then it goes into the crowd chanting the whoa whoa whoas. It gave me that kind of feeling. Like it really was an incredible concert. I've seen them a couple times now, and you know I saw them at a really great venue in San Antonio called the Aztec, and they crushed it. I was up in the balcony on that one, and you could just see the whole bottom like general admission floor area was just one big mosh pit. It was so cool to watch from above like that. But this concert at Moody Amphitheater is like the entire crowd jumping in unison. Just, I mean, everybody just having a blast. And not only did Turnstile put on a great concert, another band, Amyl and the Sniffers, which I told you about before the show, and you expressed that you're familiar with them and you think they're awesome, as do I. Wife of the pod has been getting into Amyl and the Sniffers. She was excited to see Turnstile, but really excited to see Amyl and the Sniffers. And they crushed it too. Like they are like a really good band, and honestly a lot heavier than you think they'd be. You know, I think that's just kind of a live music, like camera adds 10 pounds kind of thing. You know, I think everything just, you crank the bass, you crank that low end, and it just sounds like you just feel it rattle you, and you're like, oh, this is heavy. But they really, really put on a fantastic show. Had a lot of choice words for, you know, a certain administration, you know, a certain government in the world. And, you know, I really just, what a time to be alive at that Turnstile concert. I mean, just absolutely fantastic.
There's nothing better, you know, like I remember totally different energies, but Red Rocks, Dr. Dog, it's like, you know, every song and like inside and out, and they play everything you could have wanted to hear. And it's just a bunch of other dorks and everyone's swaying in unison and happy to be there and acting like they know each other. I'm pretty sure a guy wrote me into his will in the merchandise line. You just love like when the music hits. Again, Dr. Dog, Turnstile, completely different energy, but like when the moments hit, it is the best. It's the absolute best. And sometimes you do truly feel it in your bones, because I went to Jordy Griep, and about halfway through my knees, I was like, oh my God, how much of the show is left? I'm having a wonderful time, but I think I'm also having a medical event.
Yeah.
What is happening? I'm sweating.
Yeah, it's I was looking at the main. I was nowhere close to what you'd call a mosh pit. It was, generally very comfortable. Everybody kind of had our space. I was
Mm-hmm.
probably, I don't know, 40 yards back from the stage. So like plenty close for my taste. You can see plenty of the actual artists on the stage. They had the big screens, very, comfortable viewing experience. It was grass, so that was nice. It was softer underfoot. That's always a good thing. Had some nice
Oh, that's always nice. It's always very
yeah.
nice.
Oh yeah, had some nice cushion sneakers on. So it was I was living the life. And they just hell of a show. Absolutely recommend, folks. If you've never heard of Turnstile and you get an opportunity to go see the show, don't listen to them first. Just go. Just go. Just do
Run,
it.
don't walk.
Yeah.
Also, I think Amel and the Sniffers had an album come out somewhat recently. It might have been over the
Mhm.
summer, but food for thought. Food for
We can
thought.
do that. We should do
Something we
that.
could check out because
We
they're
should do
great.
that.
Did they play? You should not be doing that when you saw them.
You would have to I would have to hear like the actual lyrics to it to
Okay.
know. But
I was in
probably that's
LA
one of the
shaking my shit
yes.
while you were down in Melbourne saying flash those tits. I mean, it's all
Yeah.
different cities in the verses, but
Yeah.
it's a great
Yeah. I
song.
do I do remember that.
Yeah, they're great. They're
Yeah.
fantastic.
And they played. There was a couple songs at the end that I definitely recognized because I've heard Wife of the Pod playing them. But yeah, really, really, really good show. They had another band open that we didn't quite make it there for called Speed. They were certainly just a hardcore band, but they had a flute. They had a flute player, which
Ooh.
actually, so we heard it on our way in. Like the way into the venue was very cool. You're like walking through this park. It almost feels like you're walking through like a botanical garden, like you'd see in New York City or something like that. And really, so cool walking in there and you can hear the band playing. And then there's this one song that I have just heard snippets of on like TikTok and Instagram and stuff, where it's this really heavy riff and then this like really nice flute kind of run or solo. It almost sounds like an old Western kind of thing. And it just not what you expect to hear. It's like the band Bill Murray, that has a saxophone player, and they're like a really kind of like punk hardcore band, and then they have the saxophone player, and it actually really works very well.
I could
Um,
totally see that.
yeah, and it's that's another band worth checking out. I don't know if they've come out with an album recently, but we could look that up. They're kind of off the wall. They're pretty
Bill
good.
Murray.
Yeah, it's like
I am
Bilmuri.
Bilmuri. Okay. We might just have a little feast because when you say saxophone in punk, I immediately think of like the scene, the primordial ooze that Jordy Griep came out of in Black Midi.
Mhm.
Same kind of thing, or like Squid, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I could see because I haven't really listened to a lot of Bill Murray, so like I could be off base here. But what I've heard is if Jordy Griep was just like less intense, like less of the kitchen sink kind of mentality.
Mm,
Not trying to like say one's bad and one's not. It's just like it's almost like Jordy Griep light.
okay, same
Because
refreshing
there's
taste.
yeah, there's some very unexpected elements that you'll hear, but nothing. Not sure about getting floored like the first time I listened to Holy Holy.
Okay, that's fair enough.
You know what I mean?
Do you remember the episode we did when we listened to Holy Holy? When we did a Jordy Griep episode, do you remember that?
Oh yeah.
I
Oh
remember it
yeah.
too. And a lot of people remember it at youtube.com/C/out on that line. Folks, this is just a quick reminder that you should subscribe to the channel, click the bell so you get notifications, hit the thumbs up to like the video, and of course, leave a comment. So important. Cannot stress this enough at youtube.com/C/out on that line. Seamless transition into the album of the week. Jeff, tell them what they've won.
We have one Geese, Alex,
I
but not
didn't ask for that.
but not the birds.
Oh,
Not the fowl. We have one Geese the band in their album Getting Killed. And this one was unexpected for me, but I think I suggested it to you and you were excited. So I don't know if you'd listened to it before that point and you were already familiar with them, or what the deal was there.
I had heard the single, all the singles that came off of the album,
Mhm.
100 Horses was the one where I was like, oh shit. And then before that, I had heard the song "I See Myself" from the previous album, 3D Country,
Mhm.
um, where I got this like, oh, they have like a almost like a Ween sensibility to them. And I've been really getting into Ween this past year.
Mhm.
So it like really kind of scratched that itch, that song. And then I remember going to see Vampire Weekend where they were opening for them on um the tour for whatever the fuck that album was called. Only God Was Above Us, I think. Um, and I just remember, yeah, they were the opener. We got there a little late. I got to see them do "I See Myself," and I remember pointing it out to Dante and being like, "I know that song." He's like, "Great."
Cool, man.
And little did I know that, like, all this time later, that they were gonna come out with this album that I cannot wait to talk about. I'm
Yeah,
so
that's
curious to hear what you think.
so I have just been seeing this band mentioned a lot, and there is another band called Goose that is not at all associated with this. They're a jam
Thank
band.
God.
From what I understand and what I've heard, not a fan. But this, Geese, is different. Very, very different. Now, if I were to define what I kind of heard in the sound here, I mentioned it to you before the show. It sounded to me sort of like Jordy Greet, but on heroin. It's just there's a lot of things, especially the way the first song starts out, where it's just this kind of like cacophony of sound and noise, and it's kind of like it almost reminded me too of what I listened to of Captain Beefheart, where it's like you can pick something out and listen to it and you can follow along with that, but there's like five things, six things going on at once for you to pick out and follow along with. And they all kind of wrap around each other and work with each other. So it was immediately interesting, at least to me. And then I started hearing more of, somewhat kind of talking heads, maybe just kind of like the timbre of the guy's vocal kind of reminded me of David Byrne, and we kind of just did that album. So maybe that's what kind of brought that up for me. But it also sort of the way the lyrics were written, where it was somewhat of a narrative style sometimes, but then other times it was very like stream of consciousness and kind of like almost like a lyrical version of like a Salvador Dali painting. There was a lot of really clever moments like you get with Jordy Greep. Um, but I felt like this was a lot more of a somebody almost feeling like they need to crawl out of their skin because they feel like they're going so crazy.
When you say Dali, that's like the perfect distillation of the same thought that I had. It's like the perfect image for it, where I was saying, like, the lyrics for this, you have to look at them as like images to be interpreted because there isn't really a narrative there or a right and a wrong. Like there's no real crib notes that are like, well, this is a powerful story about growing up with a cousin who was in the mafia. Like there's no sense of that. It was all like the way these things were written, they conjure up an image. Like we'll talk in particular, like the last song, some of the
Mhm.
lyrics on that kind of inscrutable, but then when you're like, no, just take them as images that are part of this thing, like then they make total sense to you because you're just observing this image of the grown fat man with no arms and legs who's meant to jump up and clap. You know what I mean? Like that's a weird fucking very specific thing to come up with. And that's like one fraction of what makes their stuff so interesting. If you get into some of like the behind the scenes aspects of this, the fact that they are all younger than 24 is pretty fucking insane. And the fact that
Mhm.
they were putting out their own stuff when they were in high school, and it like very quickly led to like some label interest, like Sub Pop was one of them. I forget who they ended up signing with, but it came together fairly quickly and was like a crash course in getting them ready for the industry. And the way that it did that is they like fought the industry the entire way
Mhm.
because no one really thought that it would take off and be huge the way that it was, especially Cameron Winter's solo album, Heavy Metal, that came out before this. That was put in like a December death slot. So I think people were like intrigued by Geese, but wanted them to do something like a little more straightforward, shave off some of the weird edges. And they're like, the edges are the point.
Mhm.
They talked at one point. I read this interview where they were talking about Van Morrison, Astral Weeks, And Van Morrison hates that album because of the imperfections. And so Cameron Winter was like, first of all, he's kind of an idiot and an asshole, so he doesn't know what he's talking about. But also, the imperfections are what makes that album so great. And those are kind of the most, like, Kenny Beats on this also said, the mistakes are, I'm horny for mistakes. And
Mhm.
that was kind of the moment where they're like, we should let this guy produce this album. Um, so it's the whole way that they got started, their whole ethos, their process, and the music they're putting out is so interesting. And it's one of
Mhm.
those the kids are all right moments because again, they're like 23, like
They're
playing at this level.
they it reminds me too sometimes of like Queens of the Stone Age, because there's a lot of like the main Queens of the Stone Age songs people know are like very riff heavy, very groovy songs, but there's a lot of songs they played where they got really weird. Same thing like back when Josh Home was in Caius, they would get very weird, and that's the same kind of creativity that I was hearing like kind of all throughout this album. The same kind of creativity that I would hear when I listen to Tool. And I'm comparing them to these like metal bands because it's just more what I'm familiar with. And when I hear kind of mind blowing stuff, it tends to be with that kind of music. Um, but to me, with this album, there were so many moments where it just felt so dark emotionally. And then you got a line where it's like, I've got half a mind to pay for the lobotomy. And you hear those things, and you go from this like feeling like you're at a funeral to like when somebody just makes the inappropriate joke everyone else wanted to make at that funeral, and you get to laugh for a second. It's lines like that. And what was the God in 100 Horses? What was the? I'm just gonna open that tab up again. Um, the in the third verse, I guess, he says, so he said, one day you will die scared, but not to worry, for all people must die scared or else just die nervous. And that's one of those things where you have to analyze it, right? You have to look at it as if it's kind of like a picture of something. But what it really reminded me of, I don't know if you've ever read any of Gabriel Garcia Marquez, wrote 100 Years of Solitude, but specifically the book The General in His Labyrinth. Like this line reminded me so much of how that general would speak, because it made sense to him, and there is some sense to be made of it, but it really kind of depends on whether you can, if you really start looking into it, it's like, well, if they don't know what's coming, they're not going to be nervous or anything. They're just not going to know what's coming. So there's like a lot of things you can kind of pick apart about it, but the way that it sounds profound and what it means to the person saying it, and when you're this deep into the album and you kind of understand the psychology and kind of the psyche of where all this writing is taking place from, it's like you understand more how that makes sense. And it's just weird how they make things that really shouldn't, just you feel what you're supposed to feel with how they write the songs, and whether they are all in sync with each other like they should be in some moments, because that's part of what, if I'm going to have any criticism at all, is sometimes those mistakes just sound so intentional, or it's like they're so intentionally kept in, when it's like, okay, he wasn't just like half a beat off, that was like threw me off the beat of the whole thing. And it only happened a couple times, but it's, I guess I have to understand too, that's part of the charm, like you're saying. That's part of what made it so engaging and so interesting, and really so like thought provoking to listen to and talk about.
Well, and I think that kind of stuff, those little blips, those mistakes that they love kind of come with the territory of when you're doing kind of complicated stuff. Like there's not necessarily too many off the wall time signatures, but there are some kind of like metric modulations and stuff that the rhythm section has to nail. And working with Kenny, I mean, I guess he goes by Kenneth Bloom now professionally, but
Mm-hmm.
Kenny Beats, with a name like Kenny Beats, there's going to be special attentions paid to the rhythm section. Um, and they just had to be perfectly tight because that's the core that everything else could splash off of. Obviously, like, it's Cameron Winter's songwriting, like the driving force,
Mhm.
kind of the Zappa-esque figure, if you will. Um, Getting him in all the time now.
Yeah.
It's back, baby. But he's kind of, I think, like the lyrical driving force and like has the idea of what the song is supposed to be. So to give his concepts structure, rhythm section had to be super solid, super nailed down. And then you can leave in some of the like odd mistakes that they make, but they're trying cool stuff, and that's why it's
Mhm.
happening. And it the really interesting thing is we talk a lot about artists in here who wear their influences on their sleeve. Sometimes it's the Eminem abracadabra where they just rip it off wholesale,
Yeah.
do not transform the ingredients at all. I realize Haley Williams on her album was also very, very guilty of that. I forget what song she straight up ripped off, but I was looking at the album the other day and I'm like, oh yeah, she did that.
Mhm.
So you get a lot of like, you know, rippy rippies. You also
Yeah.
get some people who just wear their influences on their sleeve. Sabrina Carpenter and Dolly Parton. I get none of that. Like, again, 3D Country had like a Ween-esque feel to it, and then this felt less like anything else I could compare it to, and not
Mhm.
necessarily because they invented new instruments and new sounds. It was just the way that they were putting together rock songs. The
Mhm.
way that, like, if you wanna call it indie rock, art rock, whatever you wanna call it, they took rock in a very specific direction that nobody else is really doing. And it's complicated, but it's not like completely inscrutable. Like you don't know what to
Mhm.
do with this. It's accessible. It's very weird. There's some off the wall stuff, but there's so much beauty in it in the way that Cameron Winter's vocals are like the David Byrne comparison, I think is very apt, where it's
Mhm.
like this like kind of slurred, marbly wailing and like there's kind of weird falsettos. And it's never like a goofy put on. It's just like totally into it and authentic. This thing drips with authenticity. So much of the lyrics you can tell come from the same space, playing on these themes. There's a lot
Mhm.
of images of like horses and being crushed under the weight of things and being a boat or a sailor. Like there are a lot of religious themes that come up over and over again. So I really think it is just like someone who is that dialed into the way they're feeling and the things that are on their heart, and they translate it in an artistically satisfying way
Mhm.
through just very direct, creative, interesting lyrics, and then put it against the backdrop of this music that you never are really quite sure where it's going. You think you've kind of got it figured out, and then a verse ends a little bit quicker than you thought the pattern was going to go in your
Mhm.
mind, or a sound comes in, or a dynamic shift happens. Sometimes they just bail on the song. They're like, we're done, and it's just over. You never can really grasp where they're going for it. And that made it a really, really exciting listen through.
Mhm. Yeah, I think between Geese and like King Giz, Idols, Viagra Boys, Fontaine's DC, I think rock music right now is going in a very like good direction. I think allowing all of these other influences to come in, and hearing on this album, drum machines, hearing and allowing all that stuff to come in a band like Turnstile. There's a lot of bands right now that have decided we're gonna play just, it might sound like some other things, but it's just because it sounds good to us. And I think that's just, I guess, how music evolves. But I think it also means, when is music at its best is when governments are at their worst. It tends to
Mhm.
be that way, and we've got some pretty good music lately.
This is very true.
Yeah,
In the rock arena and all over the place, we've had a
yeah.
great year. Um, yeah, I'm trying to think of rock bands, rock and roll bands right now who are kind of carrying the torch of rock as we might conventionally know it. And
Mhm,
you hate to pick any one thing because each of them does a slightly different thing, but like you've got from Journey to Bon Jovi to REO Speedwagon to, you know, when does the rock sound start to change in like the 80s
Mhm.
and the 90s? Like it's gone through these different progressions. So it's hard to drill down into like, it's kind of starting to like transcend one specific genre. There was a time where you could listen and be like, that's a rock and roll song because blah, blah, blah. And then
Mhm.
with stuff like this, you're like, this is a rock and roll song because it fucking rocks. It is rock music. And they're taking it in a different direction. It's not a
Mhm.
throwback to something. It's not a reaction to something. It's just fully they're like chugging ahead with blinders on. It's not about industry trends. It's about we're going to do whatever, whether or not it's the fashion. And it just happens to be like an artistic gamble on yourself that totally
Mhm.
pays off because you make something so original. There's so much originality and again authenticity that just drips off this entire thing, like getting into specific songs too that I really want to talk about. Husbands I think was the first one. Like Trinidad is a very wild entrance, you get a little bit of JPEG Mafia in there.
Yes.
Cobra is like very fun, very good, but Husbands is when I was like, they're up to something here. They're
Mhm.
truly up to no good here, and that was one of my favorites off the album. I don't know how you felt about it.
That this was probably for me lyrically where I was like, "Ooh, they're going to a dark area here. When it's will it wash your hair clean when your husbands all die?" And it's just like it becomes it's got such a sinister kind of feel to it at certain points on this album. And I think the that's where vocally what did you say his name was? Sorry, the lead singer, Cameron
Cameron
Winter.
Winter.
Um, that's where like the way his voice sounds. It's not just like the lyrics. Those are great. And I think a lot of people could sing those and they'd sound good. But the way he makes them sound specifically, I think gives you exactly what you're supposed to feel. And I know what Getting Killed was like one. I mean, there's not a ton of listens on these yet, but Getting Killed I think is one of the singles off this one, correct?
Hmm.
Um that I feel like was one of the more, I guess, like as straightforward of songs as they did on the album.
Probably.
To me, I think if there's one that's going to ease you into listening to Geese, if you're not already listening to other bands like Idols or Fontaine's DC or other people doing some other off the wall stuff, that's probably a good entry point. I think when you get into the middle of the album though, starting with Islands of Men, it really that's when it just cranked to 100 for me all the way through the end.
Oh
Like
yeah.
the first parts of it, like Trinidad, when I went through and listened to the second time, kind of when I knew what I was expecting at that point, it was a much better, like I got it a lot more.
Hmm.
Um, but really starting with Husbands on my first listen through is when I was pretty hooked in, and then starting with Islands of Men was when I was like, oh, this is phenomenal. Like this went from like, okay, I'm glad I don't hate this album to, oh, this is actively fantastic. Um, I, oh, Pays to Cocaine is
Hmm.
fantastic.
That's a great one.
Um, 100 Horses you mentioned before, that might be my favorite song on the album.
Oh, it's
Um,
just it's so fucking good.
yeah, the way the choruses work in tandem with the verses, like going from, and I guess it's you never hear it disguised. Like it always sounds like if he wants you to feel miserable, he's going to sound miserable.
Hmm.
And it almost reminded me of like a better version of The National, like kind of the way he delivered some of the lyrics, where it was very much a um almost like spoken word in areas. Like he wasn't singing in a lot of spaces. It was just like there was too much going on for him to think about singing. But it wasn't like something was missing. It was for a purpose. He was doing it that way because you're supposed to feel a certain way. And I feel like Getting Killed, it doesn't really happen, but starting with Islands of Men, that's when you start really feeling like you're in a production. Like you're not just listening to a album full of songs, like you're in an intentional like production and vision.
Well, and it is very, very vivid. Like the way that the songs are structured, especially if you're listening. This is such a like horrendously pretentious thing to say, potentially, but if you're listening in lossless on Spotify, it truly does make a big difference. It in your headphones, it feels very layered, without feeling like it's not all one whole. Sometimes when things like you can hear them in like layers and dimensions, they sound stacked on top of each other. They don't sound like they mesh. Here you get a lot of dimension that meshes. Like they spent a lot of time, I think, producing this and working on it because the levels are all great. The sound quality of every individual thing
Mhm.
is like perfect down to a T, to the point where like even when they're trying to make something rough, it's like a filmmaker dragging the reel across the dirt in the parking lot to kind of beat it up and give it a 70s sheen. It's like, if anything, those are production choices when again you keep a weird take, or there are certain moments where the production does kind of drop out on you, and it's not really a mistake as much as it is a choice that supports what it is you're listening to.
Mhm.
And I love the way that it is kind of broken up into different segments where there's like you get Through Husbands, and that's kind of its own chunk, and then Getting Killed to is kind of like a little interlude. You get like Islands of Men, 100 Horses. There are just these little segments where like things feel like they go with one another, and then the album refreshes itself. It's
Mhm.
constantly tension and release, and just like reinventing itself. So like track to track, section to section, it's so solid. There's nothing like there's no like slow song or stinker on here. The most inaccessible one I would think would probably be Trinidad, because it's very weird off the top
Mhm.
and it might kind of glitch people out. So I think it would be either that or Long Island City, Here I Come, just because of the length of it. It is one that's another one of my favorites. There's so much going on creatively in it and with the imagery in it. Um, would love to read some at some point here. I think like the rest of it, there's no reason someone wouldn't be able to get into this. I really think like it
Mhm.
is weird, but it's not Captain Beefheart. Like you were talking about the method of listening to one thing, and like I don't pretend to understand Trout Mask Replica, but that's how I've listened to it. That's how you've
Mhm.
listened to it, is pick one thing each time and follow it through, and things make a little more sense. You don't have to work that hard with Geese. They're giving you that same like invigorating sense without kind of holding you at an arm's length with it. Um, it's just like start to finish. It doesn't feel like 45 minutes. It doesn't
Mm-mm.
feel like there's time when you're listening to it. It's great. It's phenomenal top to bottom. Like, what else is there to say?
It felt like they didn't think there was time when they were making it. Like it felt very urgent the whole way through. That's what I really, really loved about it. Um, I want to give one last special shout out to Taxes, another phenomenal song. If you want me to
Yes.
pay my taxes, you'd better come over with a crucifix. You're gonna have to nail me down.
Festival anthem
Yeah,
is
just
what that
just
one.
a fantastic. I mean, to write a lyric like that, it's just that's I say it all the time. There's a reason I'm doing a podcast about music, and there's a reason they're writing the music. Like they're just it really is was an incredible experience for me. This is a buy it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Not to bury the lead on my end. This is buy it.
Yeah.
What are we even doing
Yeah.
here? I mean, I just again, I'm looking at Long Island City, Here I Come. I knew a man, he sat behind a desk that was a million feet wide, but he laid down his hammer and he died. I knew a man big and fat, born without arms or legs, born to jump in the air and clap. He said, hang me from a yo-yo or a rope, and I'll be hanging by my neck all the same. So too shall I reach Long Island City one of these days. What the fuck is that? What the fuck is that? So then you try to make sense of that. And then you're trying to break down the images to help you make sense of this juxtaposition of words. And then you finally can, you go, oh, it is the images. As I think about it, this song makes all the sense in the world. It's like seeing the movie Holy Motors potentially on psychedelics. You see it and it makes a ton of
Mhm.
sense. Your brain's thinking in a different way and categorizing it in a different way. And you just imagine, again, those words, a man big and fat without arms or legs, born to jump in the air and clap. So think about that on like an existential level. The thing you were
Mhm.
born to do is precluded by the thing you were born with.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
there's like that dark humor you were talking about, hang me from a yo-yo or a rope and I'll be hanging by my neck all the same. It's the dark, sarcastic, dare I say, Steely Dan-esque way
Yeah.
that you convey those kind of turbulent emotions without being like maudlin and drawn down into it and crushed by the weight of it. There's just a lot of creative expression of where Cameron Winter is in his life, where this band is at this point in their career. And I'm here for whatever comes next. Word on the street is there's potentially something coming sooner rather than later. I'll be there. Definitely going to double back and check out Cameron Winter's solo
Mhm.
project, Heavy Metal. I recommend checking out 3D Country. That is great. It's honestly very different from this. But yeah, it's a buy it.
Yeah. This was a really great experience. To end the album with the words, "I have no idea where I'm going. Here I come."
Incredible.
Yeah, just the mind of a madman, and we got to look inside. Just a really, really great album, great experience. A buy it from both of us. That's been rare lately.
That's been rare. That's
Yeah,
been rare. We don't just
that
throw
we've
those
been
around
getting
anymore.
some positive reviews, but it's rare for a double buy it. But it's
Yeah,
worth
with
it.
that much enthusiasm behind it.
Yeah, that absolutely worth it on this one. Well, is there anything else that you wanted to plug or you wanted to talk about on this episode, Alex?
Is this a trick question or is this a genuine opportunity?
A genuine opportunity, a
A genuine
genuine
opportunity.
opportunity. You must seize it.
Well, the shops at the creek will be having their annual holiday sale on November 11th. We hope you'll join us for some magic and also cocoa. No, I suppose I have nothing else but to double back to the plug at the beginning. YouTube.com/C/out on that line, folks. I can't even get excited about doing this at this point. You're killing my spirit. So I guess that's the direct appeal. Is you're killing independent Alex. You're killing Jeff. He has to watch this happen to me. You could do something about it. You could stop it. You would just have to like click subscribe and the bell so that notifications are on, and then the thumbs up to like the video, and have to leave some kind of comment. That's like all you would have to do, and you just won't do it. So I don't know what I'm supposed to do. Just sit here and continue to bang my head against the wall. I've always been a great quitter,
Mm-hmm.
and I plan on quitting just as soon as you give me what I want. YouTube.com/C/out on that line. This is a cry for help, and I can guarantee that.
What'd you think of the children and the co-hosts, folks? Till next time.